Welcome to episode 2 of the WeatherNation podcast. I'm your host, Dakota Smith, alongside Meredith Garfalo. Meredith, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm doing great. I've had a lot of coffee, so that always helps, makes things go a lot smoother, I think, for podcasts especially.
First time on the show.
I'm excited.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, but Denver, though, has felt like home to me since I've moved here, and I have worked pretty much all over the country. Started my job doing my internship at WGN in Chicago, went to school in Northwest Indiana at Valparaiso, and then I made stops in Rapid City, South Dakota, Sarasota, Florida, Santa Barbara, California, before coming here. So literally, I've worked coast to coast.
That's like getting an experience like that must be super useful for especially meteorology. Really useful for anywhere, but meteorology especially. Before we dive into our top weather stories, just a bit of housekeeping. We want as many people as possible to listen to the show. So if you're listening right now, if you're listening in iTunes or wherever you're listening, comment or give this a rating and review. Let us know what you think. We would really love that, and it helps the show get noticed and get listened by more people. So that would be wonderful. And subscribe wherever you're listening to, whether it's YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. Please subscribe. Okay, top weather stories. Meredith. Big one this week happened on Saturday, the Illinois tornado. I'm going to call it sort of like a regional outbreak. It wasn't, something giant, but for Illinois, it was definitely like sort of a mini outbreak. Over 20 tornadoes. We're still getting surveys in. Most of them were EF0s and EF1s, a few EF2s, but there was one EF3 that hit Taylorsville, Illinois, resulted in quite a bit of damage. And some of these tornadoes went into the night, so that was sort of the unfortunate part of this, doing damage at night. That's sort of the worst case scenario. Meredith, you've been following this coverage pretty closely. What stands out to you about this event?
I definitely think what stands out the most is we have a tornado outbreak here happening in the state of Illinois. It's the Midwest. We've been covering snowstorms moving through there, and here we are going into the holiday season, and we start off the month with a tornado outbreak, which is actually now, for the state history, the largest for the month of December. And the tracks, you look at these and you can go to other tornado outbreaks, and it's always interesting to see how they differ. But one thing that was certain was these storms continued to drop tornadoes, and not just one or two from a parent storm. You had multiple tornadoes in multiple communities in straight lines going across the state, and of all different sizes. We had weak tornadoes, and then we had that one EF3 for Taylorsville. But one of the things you and I were just talking about, which was nice, is the lead time that they had for that tornado was, I believe, 46 minutes, something around there, which just goes to show that when we're doing our job and we're giving these warnings, and when it starts and we're showing where it's headed next, we can help give people that advanced time to get to their safe place. And I believe the parade was actually canceled that night for the city.
Wow, that's incredible. We actually talked to the warning coordination meteorologist at Lincoln, Illinois National Weather Service. Let's listen to him now.
Something else for Taylorville as well was that they were expected to have their Christmas parade at 5 o'clock that evening. We had talked to the emergency manager in that county prior to that, and he canceled that Christmas parade plenty of time. Otherwise, there would have been people out there during the parade is when the tornado was hitting. So they were all off the streets in their home. They took shelter. So I think that played a role. And in the city of Taylorville, where they had the EF3 damage, they had 41 minutes lead time that the tornado would be approaching them.
So thanks so much to Chris Miller, warning coordination meteorologist at the Lincoln, Illinois National Weather Service. Next story happened actually happened last week. I believe it was on Friday, the Anchorage earthquake. It was 7.0 magnitude earthquake, about 7.5 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska. Since then, they have had over 1,000 aftershocks, and the actual schools in Anchorage have been closed all week due to the damage. Lots of structures and roads across that portion of Alaska have been damaged. Meredith, I know you lived in Southern California for a while, so I presume you felt a few shakes while you were there.
Well, my first experience with an earthquake was in the 3 range, so nothing like what they had in Alaska. But still, I mean, you're laying in bed and all of a sudden the walls, the windows start to shake, and it's pretty terrifying, especially if you've never been through anything like that before. And So I can only imagine what it was like in Alaska. And if you go and look through social media, you'll see one of the news stations there actually took a hard hit, and their newsroom was completely shooken up, and they still went on to go and report it and talk about it. Wow. But some of the videos, just the roads buckled up. If you're not from California, if you haven't lived in California or Alaska and seen earthquakes, it's quite a scary sight, but just goes to show that, like any other severe weather event, preparedness is always good, and it's better to do that ahead of time and have a plan in place than get to that moment where you don't know what to do.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube right now, we're actually showing some of the videos, and two of the most shocking videos to me was one out of an airport, out of the Anchorage airport. The whole place is just shaking, there's sirens going off, and then one at a school where all the students are like under their desks and the fire alarm is going off. So really terrifying. I haven't really been in an earthquake.
You don't want to be.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think I want to be. It sounds terrifying. One quick anecdote, my mom lived in Southern California,
Okay.
will never move back because of the earthquakes.
Don't
Was
blame
like
her.
her one thing that she hated. So next story here. We have an upcoming storm system that's about to move on the California coast. If we're recording this on Tuesday, so we're still a little bit far out. It hasn't actually made it onto the California coast yet. It's going to bring some rain to Southern California, some snow to higher elevations, and then it's going to bring some winter weather across some parts of the southern plains and then move into the east. Meredith, as of now, where do you think this is going to impact the most people in terms of winter weather? And then there'll probably be a severe side of it as well.
These are the kinds of systems that we're the most concerned about as we go into the winter months, because with different factors like temperature, like atmosphere instability, you can have one side of the storm producing snow, ice, and the other rain, severe weather. And for the rain portion of things, as we look at Southern California, we have some recent burn scar areas there, the Woolsey Fire and the Hill Fire, which is in Southern California around Ventura County and LA County, in case our listeners are familiar with that. And a lot of the mountains and hills in that area, they're just not ready for rain. And so what we'll have to monitor for that will be too much rain coming down in too short a time. It looks to be on the lighter side, more of the showery side, which is great. But still, if you get one storm, one burst over there, you go back a year ago to the Montecito mudslides, and there was heavier rain with that forecast and a lot of advance notice. But still, when those rain rates start getting high and you're looking at a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch an hour, that's enough to trigger mudslides. So that's one concern of this system. The other one is the severe side. Of course, we just had that system come through within the last week, and we had multiple days of severe weather and tornadoes because all the ingredients are there. And I always like to use on air, it's like baking a cake. You need the instability, you need the moisture coming in, and then you have that front to help provide that lift. And when all of those come together, it's the perfect cake per se for a severe weather day. And so that's something we're going to have to watch. The third part is if we get winter weather across the south and the southeast. We don't normally talk about winter weather, Christmas in Dallas, or snow in Mobile, Alabama. So that's something we're going to have to help those people prepare for, because you don't prepare for it all the time. So winterizing your car, making sure your house is prepared, making sure that your kids are prepared too, because sometimes even the kiddos don't know what to do when there is a winter storm in a city it's not normal for this time of year.
I'm glad you brought up the mudslide aspect of it on the burn scars. We'll actually be joined later in the show by the information officer from Santa Barbara County Fire, Mike Eliason. So he's going to talk with us and get into a little bit more about that, and even talk about some of the things he saw this season. So we're looking forward to that. Any other stories stick out with you, or do you think those are the biggest three things this week?
Definitely the cold air.
Yeah.
We've had so many cold blasts lately that saying it on air, it's almost like, here's our next cold blast, here's another one. And I don't think sometimes you can just really prepare for those, except maybe staying indoors and just making sure, again, your home is winterized, because we're talking temperatures that are 10, 20, we've even seen up to 30 degrees below average. So, and for cities like across North Dakota, single-digit air temperature, you factor in the wind chill, and the feels like will be below zero easily with even just a little bit of wind. So that's been a big story for us too, is the cold air and the changes. Even mentioned down to the south. I used to work in Florida, as I mentioned, and I have friends of mine saying, wow, I had to go buy a winter coat because it's been so cold in the
Was
last
it 40?
week. Yes, 40.
Yeah, I understand that. That's a perfect segue to our tip of the week. John Van Pelt is bringing us a safety tip every week. And this week, it's for our furry friends, our pets. So John's going to tell us about that. Take it away, John.
Yeah, hi there, John Van Pelt here with this week's tip of the week, which is all about keeping our furry friends safer in the cold weather of wintertime. Yeah, it's about pets. First, you got a dog and you're going to let him out. Don't let the dog off the leash, especially during a snowstorm. Might not think about this, but it's easy for dogs to lose their scent tracking abilities in bad weather and get lost. They can't smell their way home. Matter of fact, more dogs get lost in the wintertime than any other season, so keep them on the leash and make sure they got their tags on also. Now, when it comes to keeping your pet warm enough, here's a good rule of thumb. If you open your front door or back door to let the pet out and it's too cold for you to stand there for a while without your coat on, it's probably too cold for the dog or cat to be outside too unless they are jacketed up. If you've got a short-haired breed, you certainly want to put a sweater on them or a little jacket with a high collar or turtleneck that covers from the base of their tail to their belly. Another thing to think about, ice, snow, and salt and chemicals can do a lot of damage to your pet's paws. So when they come inside, make sure you wipe their paws and their belly after every single walk in the snow or the ice. And it's not just because the chemicals are on their paws and can do damage there. Your pet can ingest dangerous substances when they lick their paws too. And also, lots of cute little booties available for your dog too. That'll help keep sand and salt from getting stuck between their toes, which will cause irritation. And around the house, if you're going to use ice melt, use pet-friendly ice melt whenever you can. And another thing we don't think about enough, antifreeze. If you top off your antifreeze in your car, make sure to clean up any spills on the driveway because that is poison for dogs and cats, and it's sweet. They like to lick it up, and it is deadly to them, so clean up those spills. And just like in the summertime, never leave your dog or cat alone in the car during cold weather. Keep them inside if you can, but if they're, dogs like Malamutes and Huskies and dogs with thick fur, you can, of course, let them outside. Just make sure they're in good shape, that their water won't freeze, and they've got a warm place to sleep, okay? And we will have more details and, of course, pictures on the video version of the podcast on YouTube and on WeatherNationTV.com, too, so check us out there.
And welcome back to the Weather Nation podcast. Thank you so much, John, for protecting our cats or dogs, whatever sort of pets you have. Horses, yes. They all need to stay warm during the winter months. So we got some trivia now related to some of the top stories that we saw this week. And I'll just jump right into it, Meredith.
Let's get it over. Let's rip the Band-Aid off because I was never a good test taker, and I want to put that out there right now. But hopefully I'll do better on this one.
Well, Chris and Mary did so well in the last 2 weeks, so I'm trying to stump people now. So I got to step up my game. Okay, so the most recent tornado event in Illinois marked the most tornadoes from a single event in Illinois in the month of December. The most recent count I saw is 26. That probably will go up. But for this event right now, it's 26. What was the previous record? And a bonus point if you can say the date, the year.
Oh my gosh.
It's multiple choice. Multiple choice.
Good.
Okay. I'm going to hide the answers actually because the answers are on there.
I promise. No looking.
Okay. So A, 24, B, 21, C, 19, or D, 15.
21.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so good. That's right. That's right. 21 occurred over 2 days in 1957. In total, 37 tornadoes ripped across Missouri, Illinois, and Arkansas, the strongest of which was an F5 that completely destroyed the town of Sunfield, Illinois. So that was quite the event.
Right.
But it seems like the tornadoes were a little more spread out across the South instead of just in one state. Like this one. This one was, there were a few in Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma, but the most of them were in.
Can I add a fun fact?
Yeah, please.
My mother survived the super outbreak of 1974, which wiped out Xenia, Ohio.
Wow.
So that's actually why I'm a meteorologist today.
That's
she told
incredible.
me that story when I was 3.
We should get her on the pod.
We should.
Yeah.
Because she helped with the Red Cross. And, it actually gives me still goosebumps to this day because she saw it was back in F5 back then. She saw that form on the house across the street. It touched down in the backyard, and just wiped out not her
Wow.
house, but the rest in the neighborhood.
That's
so
incredible.
she does have a really good story, and again, that's why I do what I do every day.
Wow. I didn't know that about you. That's really cool. Okay, next up, about the Anchorage earthquake.
Okay.
The 7.2 quake that rocked Anchorage was a big one, but it doesn't match the biggest the state has seen. So my question for you, what is the biggest earthquake in Alaska history? Okay.
Okay.
A, 9.8, B, 9.5, C, 9.2, D, 8.8.
What are the first three again?
9.8, 9.5, 9.2.
I think it's 9.8.
Gotcha.
Oh, you got it. Was in the nines, right?
It was in the nines,
Because I
yeah.
remember studying that for my CBM exam.
Oh, really?
There was questions about the largest earthquake.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I knew the 9, but I was like, the points, you made the question hard.
All right, so I'll give you the answer. I'm glad I stumped someone. I was starting to think my questions were too easy. The Great Alaskan Earthquake of 1964 came in at a 9.2 on the Richter scale. The quake not only ranks as the largest earthquake in Alaska history, but also the largest in North American history and the second largest ever recorded anywhere. The massive shake triggered a tsunami that created a 220-foot wave on Alaskan shore, and the tsunami was felt as far away as Japan, New Zealand, and Antarctica.
So scary.
Yeah, so that event was unprecedented, and I think people still talk about it today up there. I visited just I think 2 years ago. I was there, and they were talking about. I was in Seward, and they talked about like how high it got. And
I've
everything.
never been to Alaska, so that had to be incredible.
Yeah, it's a really cool place. I recommend it.
Bucket list.
Yeah, it was on mine. Yeah, so check. Okay, this October, the dry and swift Santa Ana winds caused several fires to spread in Southern California. These northeasterly winds blow off and on in the fall and spring months, but are most common from September to November. What is the origin of the name Santa Ana?
Ooh,
All right.
that's a good one.
Yeah. There's a little pressure on you.
I know, I'm starting to sweat. Can we get me some towels?
Okay, so A, they're named after the Santa Ana Canyon in Orange County, California, where these winds frequent. B, they're named after the Mayan god Ana, who was blamed during wind events in Central America. C, they're actually named after the Latin rock band Santana for his mean and rapid guitar riffs. Or D, they're not named after Santa Ana at all. They're actually supposed to be named Santana after the Caliente Aliento de Santanas, which translates to hot breath of Satan in Spanish.
Wow. That's intense. I think I'm going to have to go with B.
B, okay. The
Mayan or
the Mayan god. B, wrong.
Oh, you stumped me.
I'm proud of myself.
The first.
I'm proud of myself. Okay, so this is a tricky question.
I was going to say.
And it's a trick question. So like.
Okay, I don't feel bad now.
Technically, local media thinks they're named after the canyon in Orange County, but there are locals that claim that it was actually named after Caliento Aliento de Santanas. So there's actually some debate.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a debate between media and locals.
Interesting.
So super interesting, right?
You know, having worked in Southern California, I knew all about the Santa Anas, but I didn't know the origin. So, hey, I'm glad I learned something.
Yeah, I've discovered when it comes to origins of like weather stuff, there's always like some mystery in where it was first found and where it was first.
Well, if it was named after the band Santana, then he should have had a song about the Santa Ana winds coming through and then playing his guitar, all that
would
good
have
stuff.
been pretty cool. Yeah. Coming up, we have our interview with Mike Eliason. Really looking forward to that. Stick with us.
You're listening to the WeatherNation podcast. To tune into more WeatherNation coverage, you can watch live programming on Amazon Fire, Roku, and any of your favorite streaming services.
And welcome back to the WeatherNation podcast. We're lucky enough to be joined by Mike Eliason, the Public Information Officer in Santa Barbara County Fire. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you both for having me.
So I'm going to jump right in it here. This year has been another active year for you all. Particularly, you had the Woolsey fire that was nearby. Can you describe the season and what you all have dealt with this year?
Yes, well, wildfires throughout the West are intensifying, as you know. We've had years of drought along with those higher than normal temperatures. And here in Santa Barbara County, we try to keep 90% of all the fires held to under 10 acres. And we succeed most of the time, but a lot of small fires we're able to pounce on, and others were not as fortunate. And, as you know, with California as well as the West, there's no really longer a fire season per se. For Southern California, it used to be roughly mid-May through November. And that's become a kind of a problem. It's no longer the case. And regardless of your politics, large fires are burning with more frequency and intensity and the rate of spread than we've ever seen in the West. And here in our area in Southern California, we had, which was sadly at the time, the largest wildfire in California history, which began 1 year ago today, and that burned in December. And that fire was moving with such intensity and ferocity, at some points it was burning an acre a second. Now think about that, a football field in size every second in December. That's just not normal. And that fire was number one for only a few months until others took its place, which just is a testament again to the conditions out here in the West. This year, both the deadly Woolsey fire in Southern California and the horrific Camp Fire that you've heard so much about in Northern California began only hours apart on the same day in November. And we sent resources to both of those incidents. We sent engines and dozers and crews and a helicopter, as well as overhead personnel to help, just as those areas sent resources to us to help out during our time of need.
And Mike, I've seen you out in the field working, and can you describe for people that may not know what a typical day looks like for you? I know it's never the normal, always things are changing just like the weather, but what would you say describing your typical day during an event?
Well, for large scale incidents, it's a 24-hour operation. There's someone always at work, either at the fire lines or back at camp. And for me particularly, depending upon the incident management team schedule, there's usually a briefing either 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. That's when my day would start. And that goes over the mission objectives for the day, resources assigned, safety, medical, communication plans, updates on the containment or growth, and the weather forecast for the area for that day. And then following the briefing, that's when we get to work. Depending upon the assignments, we have several PIOs usually assigned to an incident. I believe for the Thomas Fire, we had up to 95 PIOs assigned to an incident. So that number grows and shrinks depending upon the scale of the incident. Media information and phone lines, other will go out to the community with the latest information boards or to shelters to keep folks informed as to the fire. Other PIOs will be out in the fire escorting media to get images and interviews. That's primarily what I do. I'm usually out there documenting the incident and working with media either by phone or doing live interviews. So the job of the PIO or public information officer is that gets the information directly from the incident commander, and it's all been vetted, and we disseminate that information. And that's important in this social media and instant information age, because rumors, as you know, are rampant out there on assignments, and we want to get that information accurate and out there as quickly as possible. So your trusted friend may live near the fire, and we all know that fires look much more intense, but we want to make sure that she has the correct information. It's my job to see that she does through reliable media sources. We also send out information via social media, by Twitter account, for instance, and we send videos and maps and stills out to the media. So in the evening, there's another briefing to give updates and goes over much of that same information for the crews that are coming on to work the overnight shift. And the cycle just repeats itself throughout that campaign or that incident.
So can you describe how closely you're working with meteorologists that are either on the scene or working remotely, and how their information impacts your decision making and some of the decisions that you all have to make out there?
Okay. Well, even before a fire breaks out, our regional fire chiefs for our area participate in a conference call with meteorologists, and they're briefed on upcoming fire weather conditions and forecasts, things like that, for example, and rain or upcoming storm events. We have a system coming in later tonight or into tomorrow. So that helps with the chiefs on planning what equipment is available should they be needed. After that, the local chiefs have a conference call with the local meteorologists, and that helps them even further. For wildfires, Weather, as you know, is a huge factor with these winds, high temperatures, low humidity. Those three things, along with fuels and topography, are recipes for disaster. With these large and deadly fires, those are usually being pushed along by winds, and those winds you cannot outrun. So if the fire is being pushed by a 40-mile-an-hour wind, you're not going to be effective in stopping it. Showering embers start to cause house fires by getting into the eaves and gutters and basically burning the house from the inside out. So it also affects the winds. The winds also affect the ability for aircraft to make safe drops and maneuver effectively. So in Southern California, we have Santa Ana winds, but more specifically here in Santa Barbara County, we have sundowners. And both are those foehn winds like the Chinook winds you have in Colorado that can push that fire rapidly out of control by carrying embers up to a mile away and starting those new fires. And that, again, repeats the process on and on as the smaller fires take hold. I was standing in a neighborhood in the city of Goleta at midnight one time this past July, and the temperature was 100 degrees due to those down canyon heated winds. And then we get to work with the members of the National Weather Service office here in nearby Oxnard. They routinely come to our incidents and brief us regularly on upcoming weather. That information is often used by the Fire Behavior Analysts, or FBAN. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. They're usually also meteorologists, and they're responsible for collecting all the weather data. They develop the strategic and tactical fire behavior information. They predict the fire's growth and interpret the fire characteristics for use by the incident commanders. It's their job really to get inside the mind of the wildfire and fight it using science. Most incident management teams that we deal with all have an FBAN as a member of that team. And their predictions help incident commanders battle those fires. So every fire has, and every area has a local fire history and predictability, as you know. I mean, every fire burns differently in Southern California than it does in Northern California, than it does in Idaho or Colorado. For Santa Barbara County, our saying is mountain range runs east to west, which is different than most mountain ranges that usually run north to south. That means that south slope gets baked all day long by that sun. And for us, that witching hour is in the afternoon, which is after it's been heating all day.
And I know you mentioned the fire that burned through Goleta, California. That was the holiday fire in July. And we saw the story of the couple who lost their home during that. They went back, found the wife's wedding ring, and then he dropped to his knees, asked her to marry him all over again. I'm sure that was an emotional moment. I know I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it. But what is it like to work in a job that deals with so much human impact and so much human emotion on all levels?
Well, that is, and that's a part of the job that everyone's aware of. When 911 is called, the odds are the person that is making that call is having the worst day of their life. And we're there to try and make that day somewhat better. And that was just a spontaneous moment, and I was very fortunate there to witness. These two people lost everything in that fast-moving vegetation fire that night. They only had moments to flee. She knew where she had taken the ring off to wash the dishes. He knew where it was, and we allowed them to go back that next day to look for it. And we didn't think they would find it. I mean, the house was completely destroyed. Ashes were everywhere, and they figured out where the kitchen was, and they dug through, and sure enough, they found what was left. The stone had fallen away because the ring had expanded. So she lost the stone, but she had the ring. And it was just one of those moments where, he spontaneously dropped to his knee and asked her again. And it was just a special moment. And I was glad that I was able there to kind of catch it. I understand, when I'm taking photo, in most cases, it's that worst day for some people. So I really try to be respectful but honest about what's going on in this community.
And I have one more quick question for you, Mike. And I know this is a topic more recently that has become a huge issue, is people using drones when you're fighting fires. I mean, I see time after time. Can you elaborate the reality of what that can do for a fire, fighting a fire, and if there's any example of a drone interfering and as a result it burned through a community that you were trying to protect?
Oh, sure. Well, not on a local level, but here in Utah there was a fire, and that's a big thing. We always tout the if you fly, we can't, because if you send a drone up into the airspace, the FAA has already put a bubble over that fire of airspace, and that's only for the firefighting aircraft. And it's for a very specific reason. You have a lumbering DC-10 is not going to move out of the way quickly enough out of a darting drone that's flying around that could get sucked into the engine or hit the the vertical stabilizer or something like that and then crash. So we have a rule: if there is a drone that is seen in the area or a helicopter can't get out of the way carrying 1,000 gallons of water, can't move out of the way quick enough to a drone, it hits that main rotor or the tail rotor, and we've got a problem. Okay, you can't have those kind of conflicts in the air. So you can get into big trouble if you're found flying a drone in a fire area. You can face stiff fines, you can get arrested, and you could probably kill someone if it gets sucked into an engine of an aircraft or hits a rotor. So we really try to police those. And during the Sherpa fire we had here, I actually had a citizen come up to me and point out someone who was trying to fly a drone nearby, and I went and told that person that, hey, you can't do this, this is why, and had to educate him. But it should just be common sense. You can't fly a drone in an airspace that's used by firefighting equipment. You're not going to get that close. You're not going to get a good image, and you're putting people's lives at risk. And all that aircraft that are working together in concert to put that fire out have to be grounded until it is assured that that drone is grounded or out of the airspace. And in that time frame, that fire could advance on homes. It could take out homes. It could possibly kill people. So it's a real problem. And thankfully, I did not hear anything this past season in fires that we were in, but I did hear a couple times at the Woolsey fire that there was a couple drones that were flown that created a problem for the incident. So please, if you keep doing that, just keep pounding people that if you fly a drone, we can't fly firefighting equipment, and that's going to cause that fire to spread that much more rapidly.
Last question here, Mike. Your pictures and videos are widely shared during these high-impact events. I feel like I see them sort of just naturally on Twitter during these events. So why do you think it's so important for these visuals and these images to be seen by the public, particularly those who aren't actually there seeing it happen? Maybe they're outside of the community.
Well, wildfires and other natural disasters, I mean, they can occur anywhere. Okay, we may not get hurricanes or tornadoes, but the fear and the desire to know what's happening is universal. Okay, there's still a human decency and compassion that's in play. My photos hopefully tell a story of a community. They have been used on local, national, international media, and they're not taken to exploit, but educate and to hopefully elevate that viewer who sees those images of what's going on in that community. Getting that timely information disseminated, including videos and stills that I shoot. I use a couple of Nikon DSLR cameras that I shoot, and then I can transfer it via Wi-Fi right to my phone and tweet it out, as well as I shoot the videos on my iPhone. So I try to keep those to around 30 seconds, which seems to work best for the TV and electronic media. But Santa Barbara is known around the world. I mean, with that, comes incidents of interest for people. Like, for example, during that first 48 hours of the Montecito debris flow, I gave nearly 50 interviews to different media outlets. I mean, not just local, but regional, national, international news. I was doing late night interviews with Ireland and BBC and Australia for that next day for their program.
Well, working with you in the local media, Mike, I know firsthand what a great job you do and how important that relationship is, because you have your meteorologists, you have your reporters, but then you have the firefighters out there. But together, we're all working to save lives, to keep people informed, and as you mentioned, keep people educated, because not everybody has that threat. Just like you said, everybody doesn't have that threat about hurricanes and tornadoes, but together we can get the right information out there, we can get the facts out there, and help people better prepare for that next event.
Exactly. And if I may take a few moments just to say, hey, look, a natural or a man-made disaster, it can occur at any time. So don't think it's not going to happen to you, because there's a real chance it might. So know the risks for your area. I've never been to your house. I don't know what your risks are in Colorado. I don't know what your risks are in South Dakota or anywhere in the country. So if you don't already, please take that time to make an emergency kit for yourself and for your family. And if you commute, have one in your car, because you might get stuck at work. So go to, if I can tell you, go to ready.gov and to learn more about becoming prepared and developing an emergency kit for your family and your loved ones. And the big thing is have an out-of-area contact. Your phones might not work. Have an out-of-area contact. And an out-of-area doesn't mean the next town over. The out-of-area means a few states away, so that you can contact and make sure everybody knows that you're safe.
Great advice, Mike. Thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. You guys are a critical role in this fire behavior. So thank you for all you guys do as well.
We'd like to thank Mike again for coming on the show. Seems like a great guy, and the work that he does is amazing and incredible, and glad he could join us. Thanks for recommending him, Meredith.
Absolutely. He's seen so much, and he knows the facts about fires that many of us may not realize or even think about, like the drone situation. It's something more people are getting drones, but you have to give them that space and let them do their job. Otherwise, who would want to be responsible for a town getting burned because they wanted to try to get a picture of the fire?
Yeah, I never thought about that aspect of it. So yeah, really good question there. That's going to do it for episode 2. It's a wrap. Episode 2 is in the books. So thanks so much for listening or watching if you're watching on YouTube. If you liked any of the video or audio clips that we played, you can find the full versions on our TV programming or on our website, weathernationtv.com. And finally, if you're just listening to this podcast, you can find the full video version on the Weather Nation YouTube page. We'd love to have you there. So for Meredith and myself, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.